while we might think the only thing that gets you up in the morning is success, it isn't actually. It's the lack of it, the striving for it, that unfortunately, as painful as they are, the rejections are just as important, because then you really find out, well, what is it, if this is going to be really difficult, what does it have to be?
Hi everyone, welcome, perhaps welcome back to In Conversations with Yamile. My name is Yamile, and today I have a returning guest, Daniel Williams, who after completing his PhD in composition decided to dedicate his professional life, to composing for theater. Together with the company Derevo, he traveled to many places. I would almost say all around the world, but I saw there's no Africa yet. But he went to Russia, Korea, Brazil, among many other countries. Then he has also worked with the company Frix und Fremde and with Maxim Didenko. With both companies, he created a soundtrack for Kafka, Der Bau by Frix und Fremde and Das Schloss for Maxim Didenko. In 2021, which was a year where there was a lot of weirdness in the air and uncertainty, he created his company SLOGANS Theater, and we've been working for quite a while, since 2014, and we often have conversations about art, about our views. Today's conversation is gonna be provocative for some of you. We want to, start a conversation and see where it will go. We were in Semper Opera. We went to see a triple bill.
Yeah.
And one of the pieces, the last one, had music from Philip Glass. And then we went also to Festspielhaus Hellerau. And there was something in both pieces which you pointed out about the music trapping the dancers and the choreographer. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. I mean, the music for the Twyla Tharp, the Philip Glass music, was very different from the music in the show we saw in Hellerau. But it was problematic for me in one way, that all of the phrase lengths were divisible by 4.
Yes.
And in both cases, there wasn't a particular reason choreographically to follow this. It was just a default. And for me, that's, boring.
Yeah.
Or flat. So I often found that in the longer scenes in the show in Hellerau, you were waiting for the scene or the phrase to conclude just because the music had to conclude, not for any other reason. And there was no counterpoint to that. It was just like having a big chunk of time that had to last for a certain period, because that's how it was. And that seems to me to be a kind of trap.
Yeah. And then you were mentioning in the Hellerau performance, one of the dancers, in her body you could read how she was, finding her way around this or escaping that.
Yes, because you can always, as a dancer, ignore the phrase lengths of the music.
Yeah.
As a choreographer, you can.
Yeah.
I think I say ignore, you can't entirely pretend they're not there, but you don't need to follow them numerically, or you can, so to speak, use them by ignoring them, if that isn't a contradiction in terms.
Yeah. So how would you describe, like, who is for you a musical dancer?
Well, one thing I've been watching a lot lately, New York Ballet Company and doing the Balanchine's Agon. It's from 1960 and feels almost like a rehearsal. That they're so loose and tight at the same time. So the music is made up of very complex phrasing, and that suits Balanchine very well because you can have these lines which are running through it, which have a very peculiar relationship with the music. So, for instance, in the music you might have 2 bars of very fast 3/4, followed by a very long bar of 5/8, or 5/4. Much longer. But the music maybe has a melodic climax halfway through the longer bar, and that's really the phrasing that Balanchine follows. So it's almost as if the faster 3/4 bar continues on in the dancer's phrasing, although the music's phrasing is totally changed, and they match up again later.
Yeah.
Almost like it's a sort of echo from an earlier rhythm. That seems very musical. And also to make a counterpoint. And that's important because counterpoint is not the same as dialogue. Counterpoint's two or more voices speaking at the same time. Whereas a dialogue is one person speaks and then another speaks.
Yeah.
It's very, very different. And I sometimes think dialogue is used as a reassuring kind of sharing, everyone getting their say, sort of democratic idea. Whereas counterpoint is much noisier. It's the sound of a city where everything's going on at the same time.
And where interesting things can happen.
Very interesting things, yes.
Yes.
No, I think dialogue is not a very good metaphor actually for how music and dance work together. You'd think it would be, but it isn't. I think it's too sort of politically correct. I think counterpoint is a much more important idea.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because we've also participated in improvisations, and you can see how it doesn't really work when someone is waiting for the other, or someone's taking the lead and the other one's just giving the space.
Exactly.
Just goes nowhere.
No, it doesn't work then. No, you need to provide counterpoints for each other. It isn't a dialogue actually.
Yeah.
It's counterpoint, and of course for counterpoint to work, so in the Baroque counterpoint, of course, you have to follow a certain set of rules, and things have to be harmonious together, and where there are dissonances, there's good reason for it. And you may choose to have a very different kind of counterpoint, but you have to have some set of it's not just everybody doing what they want at the same time. There have to be relationships between the two things, but it's not about waiting your turn.
Yeah.
Even if you are giving space.
Yeah.
That's something different. You can all be, so to speak, speaking at the same time but giving each other space. But you're free of verbal communication, so you don't need to be heard in the way you need to be heard if you're speaking. That's why I think dialogue's not a very good metaphor.
Yeah.
You could imagine a real extreme where the dancer would dance and then the musician would play. That would be ridiculous.
Yeah, and
but that would strictly speaking be a dialogue.
Yeah, but actually, I don't think I've done it with a musician, but there's an exercise in dance which it's exactly that.
Yeah.
It's exactly that.
Well, in itself, it's quite interesting, but as a kind of counterpoint idea, yeah, absurd.
Yeah. Okay, so there's something also that you've has come up in our conversations, and that has to do with how music has given us the way in which we experience emotions. Could you elaborate on that?
About the way
Music has.
Yes, it's a sort of little pet theory. Not very musicological, but I still think it has something. That if you look at certain composers at the beginning of the 20th century, especially opera composers, but others too, that it's not that they evoke emotion in a moment, it's that they describe the arc of an emotion. So Puccini, a very much misunderstood composer, because he writes these big, long, heart-rending melodies, and it puts a lot of people off, I think, so they don't realise how advanced he was. So you get a beginning and a middle and an end and a kind of climax to a feeling. And I think these things, so to speak, teach you how to feel. Mm-hmm. It's not the other way around. Mm-hmm. It's not that Puccini has experienced a feeling and then transcribed it for music. It's the other way around. So we sort of know how to feel because, and I think the influence of that kind of opera on cinema was absolutely enormous. A kind of unacknowledged and an unexamined debt. But if you look at La Bohème, which is one of the most popular operas and one of the most performed operas of all, it's like a movie of 30, 40 years later. Mm-hmm. In the way it's structured, in the way it deals with certain themes, and the way it engages with you and gives you shapes, sort of dramatic shapes to go through, so you know where you are and you can kind of feel them clicking as they happen. So there's a sort of familiarity to it. So yeah, there's something, but it's formal, So if you I don't know, for instance, somebody tells a joke that you don't immediately get, and then it clicks in, and you start to laugh hilariously, and then they tell another one, and it keeps you going. This has a form in time. It happens over time, mm-hmm. and it has a shape, and there are sort of peaks and troughs and builds, and these are all very musical.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my argument. The music sort of teaches you how to have them. A little bit like a comedian teaches you how to laugh.
So
like the shape of what they do.
So would you say, because in dance, for instance, I've heard it in Germany, that many people don't understand dance, probably because there are no words. Sometimes there isn't even a story. Would you say that the one element that would connect, give them a sense of a common experience throughout the evening would be the music?
Yes, and the forms of it, how it describes experiences to you, how it articulates the experiences. Yeah, because in a sense, there's always something quite abstract about dance, even quite traditional ballet. Mm-hmm. In that the priority is movement, and it's quite painful when that becomes narrative. In my view, that's a matter of taste, but I really don't like very strongly narrative dance, precisely for this reason, that it takes away that element of abstraction that. All ballet is about the overcoming of the physical in order to make something transcendent, magical. Mm-hmm. who can't understand that? That's such a general, such a hugely common feeling. That really bonds all of us.
Well, the thing is that I think it's asking for the audience to let go of the reasoning and intellect in a way, like to really connect with the body.
In some respects, yes, and the body is very strongly codified and reified in order to enable that to happen. So you see people use and expose their bodies in a way which would not ordinarily be, well, socially acceptable, let's say, and yet that's a reality. You have to involve yourself with people's bodies on that level, I think, in order to get to whatever it is you're looking for.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got to do a little bit of work, I think, there. You don't get that handed to you in terms of a simple narrative or a set of easily expressible verbal concepts.
And then where would you say the music lands? Does it land to the intellect, or does it land to the body of someone listening to this?
I think it shows you that in a sense is a false distinction. Because I think it engages all of you. I don't think there's a neat division of music that appeals to the intellect and music that appeals to the body, or vice versa. I think those connections are often quite arbitrary, or they're extra musical. They're to do with the context in which you usually hear the music. Or is there some music that requires you to do a bit more work to get used to? Yes, there probably is, but that could be geographical accident. You know, if you're really going to get behind gamelan music, for instance, as a European, you probably need to put a bit more work in than you would to getting behind Taylor Swift. I don't know, maybe not, but I think probably you would, because there's a sort of unfamiliarity which I think probably does require a bit of intellectual work, even if the initial appeal seemed very visceral. And there are some kinds of music which are very quickly international. It's something we've experienced, I think, in the last 50 years because of the way these things are distributed. So, I mean, for instance, I think sometimes there's some other po-faced, solemn discussion of techno and its origins, or hip-hop and its origins, but in both cases they are absolutely international forms of music. You can't on the surface tell where they're from or who made them. For a while, for a certain kind of musician, that was an ideal. Like John Hassell, the great American, I don't know what to call him really, improviser, trumpet player. He was a genuine improviser and a kind of composer in a very interesting way, a sort of anti-jazz. And he said he wanted to make a music, he called it fourth world music, where you could take any constituent part of it, some rhythm or he always used a lot of synthesizers in his music, and that you couldn't say where it was from. And I think that showed this very modern sensibility. So I think it undoes the idea that the authenticity has something to do with origin.
Yeah.
Which I think is very refreshing.
Yeah.
And there are not many art forms where that's the case. I think one of them is probably Buto, which I think is similarly international for all that it has very specific origins, as does techno. But I think it was very, very quickly international because of the way in which images and techniques are distributed.
Yeah, yeah.
And their modern high-tech distribution mechanisms, which make the idea of original authenticity absurd.
So, what is your approach to composing for a theater show?
That does depend a lot on whether the end result's going to have a set of pieces which will always be used in a certain order, like with King Lear variations, or whether it's going to have an improvised order, and possibly even improvised material, but with a certain, like with Ice Cream, the show I did recently with Valentin Sim in Berlin, or somewhere in the middle like Der Bau, where there are not really, let's say, half a dozen chunks of material, not exactly that, half a dozen ways of making sound given a certain setup, but it's up to me in what order I use them. And as far as I know, I've never used them all in exactly the same order. I mean, I can't promise that, but because the show, it enables the show to be, like all these excellent paradoxes, the same but different.
Yes.
Every time.
Yeah.
I think with the improvisation things, the thing which gives it its drive is I'll always go in with a certain number of technical things I want to try out. It could literally be a new bit of kit or a new combination. So the setup you build is the first really creative act, because you're deciding what you're going to have with you. And that gives you a certain tension when you're making these counterpoints, that you go in ready with certain things you're going to try whatever happens, and if somebody is doing something quite strong and you start to push against them with this thing you've made a decision to do, if you go in with a kind of strong drive to do something you decided to do, I think that's all the better. It gives more tension. You've got to be careful, you've got to make really good judgments about, well, I mean, it's obvious what you can't do. You can't go in and just make any kind of racket you want. Neither can you walk in and dominate. And I think that's sometimes harder for musicians than they realise, because they're used to getting all the attention. And the first thing you've done, especially with improvised soundtracks, but not only, the first thing you've done is give up that focus. You're not going to be the focal point. In exchange, you're going to be able to get inside people much more deeply than otherwise. Paradoxically. And you have to remember that the audience will always, their brains will want to see relationships between the movement and the sound. You don't need to worry about that. They'll want to do that, and they'll make them happen. So you can just feel those. For when those happen, you can wait and try and read them and react to that too, because you want to be, you want to be also feeling the audience.
And then, because recently we had a rehearsal for King Lear variations, so we were rehearsing with the retinue, which are these teenage dancers from the modern dance company from Otone. And you said something quite interesting, because so you're not going into this dialogue game, but you said you are following them. So what did you mean by that? Because the choreography is set. It's, however, not set in this like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's more, but it's set in the sense that there are parts following each other.
Well, in that case, particularly one scene they have, which is, so to speak, the group solo. So you always work with them with tempos. So it's always had this 128 BPM tempo. And that's actually all you need. As long as you're both at the same tempo, you're fine.
So what do you mean by you're going to follow them? What is that for you?
Well, for instance, in a number of times that choreography, they start and stop. So they may stop and become a group. Well, you could decide to make something climactic in the music when they stop, or silent, or follow them in that way. Because they're going to be in time, because they everything is I was talking earlier about the problem with these all phrasing divisible by 4.
Yes.
Here we can take advantage of that. So because everything is made up of groups of 4 beats, you can play around with that. So at what point would you drop a beat out underneath what they're doing? On the second bar or the third bar? Leave it running the whole time, etc., etc. Would you wait for, because you're doing it live, if they're building up towards something, and you could like bring in a bass line at the time they start running around again, or you could leave it a couple of bars because everyone's expecting that to happen, so you tease it a little bit, and you got to follow them to do that, so you feel like it's underneath them. That's a very specific case because we've got that tempo. So it's not really improvised. It's the music, what they do. Okay, there are, within the choreography, there are expressive things they're free to do in a number of ways. So they're free in that way. But the tempo is always the same. And the music underneath is always made up of units of 4. But as I say, the phrase lengths are not always, because I'm able to control them.
Yeah.
So because they're theoretically there, you can decide whether or not to. What we won't have is phrases going on until I've finished my 16 bar phrase or whatever it is. That won't happen.
Yeah.
Because I'm free to turn that into 8 2-bar phrases, or 16 1-bar phrases, or no real phrasing at all. And because their counts will stay the same anyway, because their counts are based on the tempo, not on the bar counts.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's quite a lot of freedom there, which was deliberate because they wanted me to do the live electronic stuff underneath. So I think that was a good compromise.
Yes.
So it's always the same but different.
Yes. Yeah.
And in this case, the drive is always going to be similar because it's quite fast.
It is.
100 BPM, 120 is quite fast.
It is. So, who would you say, or what group of people will have been your influence in making music the way you do it?
I think the biggest single experience for me was my first encounter with Buto. I think that was that's when I had a sort of inkling of how you could use music, and I was very lucky to work with Derevo at exactly the right point, so you could really get away with murder. But then to see that again, internationally, and to compare the way in which Russian dancers and Japanese dancers approached using music, like the very clear differences, had a profound effect. And also I think that what's really interesting when you work internationally is that, let's say everybody plays a piece of Mozart. Well, it's going to mean very different things to people from different parts of the world. It's not going to have the same associations. It's not going to have the same cultural signifiers. I don't really know what to call them. And I found partly because their technical training is so good, I found in the Japanese musicians a sort of fearlessness about musical material, which I aspire to. You know, I think they really did have an any means necessary attitude without any hang-ups, because I don't know if what would be interesting is if they had that similar approach to more specifically Japanese material, historical material, and quite exactly what that means in comparison. So that's why I think these international forms are so important, because they represent such a huge freedom.
You would say in this case electronic music for theater, or
no, not necessarily. I mean, it's only actually no. In my experience, the sort of musicians who worked with Butoh, Japanese musicians who worked with Butoh, tended to be instrumentalists actually. I was the one bringing in the electronic stuff. That's not entirely true, because there was less of a distinction between the two. That's a good example. They were much, keep in mind this is 20 years ago, when using electronic music in the theatre was not unheard of, but was not really accepted. It was a lot of fear, shouldn't this be in a nightclub, or shouldn't this be... they of course had none of that. None at all. No, absolutely no feeling of, oh, this isn't appropriate on a stage, or none of it. I mean, that's changed enormously, of course, in the last 20 years. Given the development of electronic music and its acceptance more broadly, but also its budgets, its convenience. There's usually only one of you. Yeah. You've got to be honest, you know, who the hell's paying for an orchestra anymore? Nobody. You very, very rarely get to work with other musicians. It's extremely unusual. So you have to become a one-man orchestra. What's the easiest way to do that? Electronic instruments.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. So your dad, he was an academic, am I right to say that?
That's correct, yes. He's a musicologist.
And he dedicated a lot of his time analysing Bach's music.
Not so much analysing it, but writing about it, yes.
Okay.
He was more of a historian than an analyst.
Did his views have an influence on you, on how you view music?
Yes, he was unusually broad-minded about music. So I don't think he really... Well, the way he put it is that I've got no problem with highbrow and I've got no problem with lowbrow. I just don't really like the middle very much, was his approach.
Okay.
But as a result, he didn't... He'd look for music that moved him pretty much anywhere. So that was good. And also, I think with Bach as the example, one of the reasons he liked Bach so much is that Bach's a proper artist. So for all that he had a certain success as a professional musician, and his real work was what he did at home on his own, dreaming up these enormous artworks that of course never really got very far. there's something very moving about that and very inspiring. So that feeling that you somewhat provocatively, even aggressively, are saying, no, the situation as it is not good enough. I'm going to reimagine it in my own way. And that's, I think, very inspiring.
Yeah.
You know, we could always be doing better.
Yeah.
But I think that's what keeps you going artistically, is that the next thing you do is going to be better. It's going to be good.
Yeah.
That has a sort of absolute value, because it is inspiring and represents a very important sort of freedom. I know people don't often associate that with Bach, which is a pity, but it is important to remember he was a failure as a composer, relatively speaking. Nevertheless, that's what he put most of his industry into. But he didn't get the jobs he wanted. He didn't get the fame he wanted. So it's always a bit much now that, you know, everybody acts like the B minor Mass and the Matthäus Passion just dropped out of heaven, and we always loved and supported them. No, we didn't. They were unperformed in their final states. And that's true of so many of his most cherished works. There's a very, very sweet letter that he wrote to his son who got a job in Dresden at the court, with a copy of his 6 organ sonatas, saying, you know, can you play these, see if you can get anyone interested in them. And these are now the sort of golden high point of Baroque organ music for organists. You know, this is like these are like the Chopin etude, or the you know, the proof of virtuoso ability. And he, you know, he's trying to get his son to flog them to someone in the court. And of course, it didn't work. But why did he write them? Like, what? He didn't need to.
Well, I have my theory there. I mean, my theory, I think it was because it never got published. It was this unfulfilled dream that kept him going and
Yes.
doing even better and better.
Paradoxically, yes. It is. So it's while we might think the only thing that gets you up in the morning is success, it isn't actually. It's the lack of it, the striving for it, that unfortunately, as painful as they are, the rejections are just as important, because then you really find out, well, what is it, if this is going to be really difficult, what does it have to be?
Yeah.
If it's only me who drives this, or people close to me and people around me. And I think that's an important part of art history. I think it's an important part of creativity.
Yes.
To be to try and create this inspiring energy.
Which I think.
Which is not the same thing as spreading success.
No.
Which I think can be actually slightly alienating. You know, you take these huge megastars, are they inspiring creativity, or are they sort of inspiring some sort of alienated awe? That they live beyond us, they live in this sort of dream world. I don't think that's the case with Bach. It's more like, you could do this, but you're not necessarily going to get the attention you want. But it's so valuable to have done it, and there will be people who get it. Maybe not everybody, but some people will.
Yeah, I mean, in my view, I think that is lacking nowadays. This like just devotion and persistence, and you know that it's like, I don't know, the way I see it, not only with Bach, with other composers back then, they were really like, they couldn't help it. It had to come out of them. And I think nowadays a lot of artists, as soon as they have a no, they just give up or they compromise. They then go to, oh, there's a funding for this kind of project, so I'm gonna do that. Not what I wanted to do, right? So
I think it is, yes, because we're encouraged to see it as a kind of career path. And however successful you are, I don't think it is.
Yeah.
For one thing, you have a successful performance, the next day it's like it never happened. You've got to build the next one. Well, that's not true if you're a dentist. Sooner or later you get promoted, sooner or later you have your own practice. You know, there's no path in that way. I mean, Bach's Contemporary is a good example of this. And I think this is also what I mean about the sort of the aggressive aspect of this isn't good enough, we need to do better. Handel was Bach's contemporary and had huge success and made a lot of money, but he spent it all because he wanted to get Italian opera style going in London, and he would self-produce these things. He bankrupted himself on a number of occasions, and he wouldn't stop doing it. And of course, a lot of these are the pieces he's most cherished for now. So he was successful, especially financially, but he spent all his money trying to give the world what he thought it really needed. And like Bach, who also wrote music that was rather old-fashioned or considered old-fashioned, or used old-fashioned techniques, he's trying to produce Italian opera where it's totally unfashionable and everyone's like, this is over. And he's like, no, this is much, much more important than the bullshit everyone's getting so wound up about now. Well, I find that very appealing, and you probably should bankrupt yourself doing that, because the ultimate quality of what you're doing matters more than bowing down to the taste of the day. We've totally lost touch with this, where it's all marketing and having to prostitute yourself as if this was a virtue, as if this was some sort of technique that you should learn. And well, aren't there better ways to make money? I mean, I think there definitely are. You know, 1 in 10,000 artists makes a lot of money. You know, as a business, it's catastrophic. Not really viable.
So, what do you aspire to with slogans? What is your aim or your?
I suppose there's 2 things I want to do in the next year. I want to, simple really. I want to tour somewhere, like go somewhere else with a show, somewhere outside Dresden, with the full show. And I want to make a new one. It's time. I want to do a new one once a year, really. And it is King Lear's from last year, so it's time for a new one.
Yeah.
So those 2 things. Keep it simple. I don't. I think I want to do a new show because I really want to test the way we put together King Lear with very, very different material. See what happens. And to take it somewhere else, I want to see what another town makes of it.
Yeah.
Because I think you always have to keep on the move a little bit.
Yeah.
And you're somehow always better off in a town other than the one you live in, I think.
Yeah.
Because you're always going to be a novelty.
That's true.
In your own town, everyone's like, oh, it's these people again.
Yeah. Next week we are having these performances from King Lear Variations.
Yeah.
Are you gonna make some changes? How do you approach when you are gonna perform once more something?
It's been a year since we did it. We did 2 performances. I think we haven't done it enough to make any big changes. So I'm not closed to developing, but I want that to happen more internally. So I want to see what happens when everybody goes back to making the scenes as we did them, and see if they want to bring new things, and begin to look at changes organically in that way. Partly because we don't have a huge amount of rehearsal time, so I think we're better off using it to put the play back together. We have one new performer who's new to the show, so we need to give her enough time to. But looking back at it, I didn't see any reason to change anything. I want to see how it kicks in. Like I say, within the structure we have, I'm not closed to changes, but let's see what everybody brings.
And you, as composing the music, will you change something? Or
No.
Okay.
I don't think I will. Same with dramaturgy. I don't really see a need to.
Okay.
We need to learn what it all is a bit more, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so if you are interested, next week in some parts of Germany we have the winter holidays coming, so perhaps you come to Dresden. We are performing King Lear variations in Societäts Theater Dresden at 8 o'clock on the 3rd and the 4th of February. I'm gonna leave the link below so you can get your tickets, and we'll see you there. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks.
Thank you.